Looks like we're live on the air. Welcome, everyone, to the Russell Hobbs and the Big Picture Show. My special guest today in the studio is Michael Cain, and I'm very glad to have you here, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Russell.
It's great. And, we have people on here that I feel like are important to the arts and entertainment industry and people who have very interesting lives. And so it's good. And, it's great. As I said earlier, I want to get to know you better as we do this show. And so the first thing I want to ask you is, what was your childhood like and where'd you grow up?
I was born in Longview, Texas, and to a father, mom and dad, who moved soon after that to Garland. And so raised partly in Garland, moved away when I was 6 to North Carolina. I grew up there until I was 15, back to Garland, which I'm not sure what my parents were doing, but great city, by the way. And then Dallas until I moved to LA for a decade, and then back to Dallas, and because of Deep Ellum. So
your LA decade, was that, like, where'd you go to school in Dallas?
North Garland High School.
Okay.
And didn't really understand anything below 635 existed. Wasn't really any reason. Didn't know that White Rock Lake was there. When I was 3, my parents, the day after Kennedy was assassinated, my parents brought me down to that plaza. I can't guarantee it was the day after, but that was all I knew of Dallas. That it was a long ways away, and so went to University of Texas at Arlington, and studied film and acting, and decided I wasn't going to be great at that, but loved storytelling. Went into real estate, and was lucky enough to lose everything in '86. Along with a lot of other people in their 20s, and then had to decide what my passion was, and film. And so that took me on the path to lead to LA. Went to the American Film Institute, got my master's degree. I went there because David Lynch had gone there. And David Lynch, John McTiernan, Darren Aronofsky, amazing group of Janusz Kaminski, really small conservatory that taught film, and I got super lucky even to get in. But everything brought me back to Dallas. So
regular kid from Garland goes to LA, and you're running with the big dogs, making big storytellers. I mean, those.
Yeah, I was always lucky. I mean, the American Film Institute's 126 students a year that get accepted into the school. They declined me at first to get in. So did SMU's film program. And I was in the process of buying Club Clearview down in Deep Ellum with 2 college friends of mine. And it was kind of real estate had crashed, and what was I going to do with my life? And they wanted to buy Club Clearview because Jeff Swaney and Yarbrough and all those guys were tired of probably running a club. And I literally left the lunch where we were negotiating the deal for nothing almost, and walked into the lobby and asked if I could check my messages, and found out that I'd been accepted into the American Film Institute because somebody dropped out, and they offered me to be the replacement 2 weeks before the school year started. So went to LA, and that's a networking school. It's really about teaching you the art of storytelling, but it's one of those where the people around you move up. And so I was lucky enough to work on a film called One False Move that Billy Bob Thornton wrote with Bill Paxton, who became a then friend for life after that, and Billy Bob and that whole gang. And so it's just that group kept kind of moving up. And
okay, let me slow you down. You're bringing up a lot of interesting points that I want to talk about. First of all, that project you just mentioned with Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton is not the one where the airplane crashes and they find the money, because I love that picture, but this is a different one.
Yeah, that was Sam Raimi who directed that one later on. This was well before that. This would have been shot in '89 and came out in '91 and just crashed and burned. Nobody saw it. And then I think it was Ebert had this private cruise that he would do every year where he'd pick his favorite films of the year. And he picked that film, and all the critics went on to and discovered this contemporary film noir story that's really, really well done. One False Move. Get a chance to check it out.
I want to see that. It's funny because a lot of times now I have the smart TV and like 1,500 channels, and there's like 20 movie channels that preciously run all this great content that were done by brilliant writers, directors, and actors, but the movie never made it, right? Like Cinema Noir, like Channel 27 on Antenna World. And you see these great movies there that never really made it big, so they're not in demand on streaming necessarily, so they just end up on these free channels. And that one I haven't seen, but it seems like one of those types that may end up there.
When it came out before that time that there was really, I mean, I think Netflix didn't exist at that point, and HBO was probably just happening. Fox was a new channel that was coming on with Sunday night programming. I mean, the evolution of media has really given a lot of these stories, these great stories that couldn't find traction in the beginning, a new way of being discovered.
So good, yes.
A lot of gems coming out of that.
Okay, so you're at North Garland High School, and you wanted to get in all these, you were passionate about film, wanting to get into right academic environment to learn the trade and learn the craft. And that's a moment, that's a great moment you mentioned where you were trying to almost buy a club, which thank God that your direction changed, because you're one of those, you just don't really want to be tied to owning a venue. I have experience in that. I can tell you firsthand.
You would know more than almost anyone.
The other thing that it's interesting about that story is, what year was that? Because that was in the 90s.
It was 87.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 87. And I had met Jeff Swaney and Yarbrough. One of them was a fraternity brother of mine. That's the only reason I found out about it. And I mean, I can say now we were going to buy it for $75,000. It was nothing, but and it had this rich history because I had gone to the club during the punk rock time period and gotten to experience in Deep Ellum in that way, where your windows might be busted out when you came back out, and you could climb on top of abandoned buildings and hang out and look at the city. The that and a lot of that period was formative for me because it was teaching me about storytelling, on a different way. And I think that's part of why when I finally returned and created the Deep Ellum Film Festival in '99, I always had this love of the rich history of Deep Ellum. And as somebody who loves movies, but I tried acting. Lou Diamond Phillips and I are friends, and we were in acting classes together at UTA. And I deny what he says. I was a better actor than him. That's okay. It's cool for him to say that. Yeah, he can say it now because he's got all that money and stuff. But Jack Alder, who was head of Theater 3 at the time, he was the teacher for that. And I came up to him and I said, "What do you think? Can I be great? Can I be brilliant at this?" And he said, "I think you'd be better behind the camera." And as a monotone human being, which I am, it was refreshing to have somebody just lay it out there, but to know that I still wanted to be a storyteller, I just knew that wasn't the kind of storyteller. I could instead support those great storytellers who are actors or performers or musicians or directors, it's like.
Right. I mean, if your goal is to tell a cool story, it's really it's a better seat to be in as the writer, director, creator than the actor who has to be sort of the monkey told what to do in a way. I mean, there's advantages to both sides.
Yeah. To be an actor, to be a great actor, it's in your blood. You can't do anything else. You'll do whatever you've got to do to maintain that life until you can't. Mm-hmm. It's a very different skill set. You wear your emotions on your sleeves. You've got to be able to pull them up instantly and be able to laugh, cry. You got to be able to go in depth. And it's a skill set that I don't have. I'm much better at getting calmer as things get crazier. As always, never giving up. And that's the skill set that I'd learned to realize through my brief stint in commercial real estate, that I was good at packaging things and putting people together and being an amplifier of other people's stories.
I want to go back to a moment that you mentioned there that I treasure. The moment of the 80s in Deep Ellum was so amazing because to tie this together, we were basically living in a movie set. Here was a ghost town with venues just starting to pop up, people coming that, and there was a moment, in 84 when I moved into Ghost Town, and 85 and 86, it seemed like everyone in the neighborhood that is known now as Deep Ellum was either artist, musician, poet, art lover, art promoter. It seemed like everyone there were thousands of people. It was before neon even hit Deep Ellum.
Right.
It was an underground, beautiful movie set. And everyone there was there about art. For 2 or 3 years, that's what it was. The commercialism came later. The carnival, as I would call it, came later. The parking meters and all the reality, that we were escaping came later. But there was that window of time there. That was a movie maker's dream. And guess what? We didn't have a camera. I finally bought this big old clunky VHS in like 87. It was like this big suitcase on your shoulder.
Sure.
And I went to.
Did it have the cord that attached to the thing?
Probably the cord to a battery or something. No, the VHS and the battery was all in it. Big Panasonic thing. So I went to Europe for 6 weeks with my girlfriend, and I left it with the club manager at Theater Gallery. And I was like, document everything while I'm gone. But if we knew then what we know now, we would have been shooting movies like that whole time, because it was a wonderful, surreal, beautiful setting to make any kind of story you wanted to make.
Yeah, we live in a very different time now where everyone has a camera.
Yes.
And everyone can be a storyteller or a filmmaker. How they use that is very different. But that time there was a purity of also the being in the moment and it unfolding around you. And you weren't worried about, maybe your sins of the moment, because that's it. There wasn't social media. There wasn't, somebody posting on Facebook or Instagram or all the other ones. It'd be wonderful if you had one person shooting.
That's right.
I think David Holtzman's diaries is a great example. Kit Carson, who was a big mentor to us with the Deep Ellum Film Festival, the first person we honored, he did a thing about a guy documenting his life as he's about to go off to war, to Vietnam, and him deciding that. And there's something unique about it because you never saw footage back then. It was like, it felt like somebody was actually doing a diary. And that's what I wish we had more of with Deep Ellum. And even that whole time period was a little bit more documentation, because it was difficult to have a camera back then.
It really was. It was cost prohibitive. I mean, people had film cameras that would be expensive to develop, and they were probably off doing something. There were just 2 or 3 people that even shot bands playing. But to get the scene of the street, 84, 85, 86, 87, to get the poets on the corner and just the vibe that was there, the zeitgeist of the day was rich with people that were just mingling on the street and walking around, going club to club. And to capture that, I've talked to a couple of people and say, hey, did you get any of that? And not much. It's either the camera was on the band, which is great, but not really what I'm wanting to see now. And, it's fun. It's maybe it couldn't have been such a beautiful moment if there were cameras everywhere.
Yeah, I think, there's been certain documentaries that have come out that capture some of the music scene, but not all of it. I think they're all very individual about specific types of music that came out. And they are mostly generated by footage of the band and then cutting to people today talking about it.
That's right.
And I would have probably loved a little bit more of capturing that time period, but maybe that's what a great narrative is about, being able to recreate some of that. And, I think, projects like the history of Deep Ellum and even the Star Club and all of these, they capture a unique window of time with a unique group of people that maybe it's more fun that we surprise people with it. That there wasn't a ton of footage floating around back in the day, so it allowed you to surprise people now, because there's very little that surprises us anymore.
That's very true. And I have this other thought on the whole subject, and that would be that it was sort of a mythological, it was larger than life to be there. And now looking back, when you talk about it, it's larger than life. And to be able to tell people, it's almost like mythology because we couldn't actually capture it. Like everything now is so captured. You've got, Andy Warhol said, yeah, everybody have their 15 minutes of fame. Now it's everybody has their 15 seconds of fame on TikTok or something. And what they're using it for is not all that great. You know what I mean?
No, it's hard to be clever in this world where there's smart 13-year-olds who are putting things out. If you're any other kind of story, that's why I like longer form. Mm-hmm. Those 15 seconds of fame is great, but does it really create any impact? Does it change anything? Okay,
so I've learned today. You went to North Garland High School. I was at Berkner earlier than you. So similarity, suburban kids sort of going into Dallas. So what was your first exploration into Dallas as a high school kid? I used to go to Mother Blues and we'd go see bands everywhere and it was scary and cool,
Yeah, I think the very first time I actually even went anywhere, obviously the State Fair of Texas every year was one way to get me. So I knew Fair Park better than I knew Dallas. I didn't really begin exploring Dallas until I was in college. And at that point, things like, obviously Club Clearview, the Video Bar, all that part, the Bar of Soap, all of those places nearby. And it wasn't so much to go listen to the band, it was more socializing.
Right, because there were cool people there, like-minded. It was a scene. It's funny, you remind me, like the Theater Gallery started in 84, the Profit Bar 85. Mm-hmm. I remember Swaney did a party across the street in what's now Buzz Brews in late 85, I think. And but my point was, all the clubs really came in 86, but a lot of times there'd be 100 people outside the Theater Gallery and 80 watching a band. Or any club, the scene was sort of outside where you could talk and catch up with people you hadn't seen all week, because the destination was to go to Deep Ellum on the weekends, and that was the culture. And the bands were great, and you'd watch your favorite band, but really the draw was, like you said, it was fellowship with like-minded people that were edgy and different than what was in the suburbs or at the mall.
Yeah, it was a really unique culture down in Deep Ellum. I remember even going to the Hot Club at one point and, finding that sort of really punk rock scene in there. There was with cages and a little scary. And there's also the Shannon Wynn piece of Lower Greenville and Fast and Cool and Tangos and all those spaces. They were a place to connect with people. There might be great music. I remember seeing Prince perform an after show at one of those, or David Byrne, do a piece. Like, there was interesting things that would pop up, but it's kind of because you knew people and they told you about the secret hidden performance that you weren't getting invited to if you were just the public. Mm-hmm. That was more of, I lucked into that community. Mm-hmm. And I think that was, once again, as you were saying, there's artists of all different kinds, and putting nightclubs together, that's an art. Appreciating and exploring art. It's a rare gift to be able to enable that many bands, that many artists to have a support system behind them. And I think that's really what you got with Deep Ellum. And then you see the Star Club borrowing, bands, or they go to your place, hear the bands, and then invite them to come over to the Star Club. But y'all were really cutting edge at the time.
I remember when Blake, that owned the Start Club, sent a crew over and they shot Screamin' Jay Hawkins at the Profit Bar. So we had Screamin' Jay at the Profit Bar, and Reverend Horton Heat was the backup band. And then after we after everybody left and we closed the club, we all went over to the Start Club to hang out, and there was Screamin' Jay on all the monitors. So the scene was really sort of melded into one cultural experience at that point. It was very cool.
Yeah, at the very tail end of my North Garland High School day, and a day coming up this month, actually, probably any time, I was in a Church of Christ during the morning service, and in the midst of a prayer, the roof began to rain down on the congregation below. The entire roof of a new building collapsed on the congregation. And up to that point, I thought I was going to be a minister, or I was going to be, I was leading things on the bus every week. And that moment where 86 people went to the hospital, and one little girl, I watched her get hit by a piece of roof and pass away, and all sorts of stories of pulling people out underneath this roof. At the time, that's the kind of guy I was up till 18. So going to Deep Ellum wouldn't have really been that appealing, because I was in a lot of sports, swimming, football, track, annual staff photographer, and the photographer is what probably like drew me into being an artist, was free access to film and developing. But I always thought I had this other path, and so I wouldn't go to Deep Ellum. But after that roof collapsed, suddenly I was open to exploring other parts, the voices within me that I might not have listened to before. And
how symbolic. So you're telling me that you were sort of straight-laced, doing sports, going to church, and you were thinking of being in ministry, and you experienced the roof falling in on the church building. And it made you, in a way, you might have thought, why did God let that happen?
For sure. Honestly, that evening we went to another church. Think about it. A roof collapses on us. A majority of us go to a Saturn Road Church of Christ that night for the evening service, even as we had people in the hospital. And like I said, I watched, the girl was in front of me, a piece of roof like this came loose. The electric wires held it, and it hit her while she was standing there. And a friend of ours was holding her hand, getting her foot out of the thing. And I watched the life leave her eyes in that moment. She wasn't knocked over or anything. It was more like just standing there and gone. And, it was moments like that where storytelling became something, the arts, suddenly there was this shift in my mind, and I thought I was going to play football at Abilene Christian and go out there, and I went there and I just didn't feel it. I didn't feel the vibe anymore.
It was a pivotal moment in the Michael Cain movie.
Yeah, that'd be one of those where, like, if you flash back later, like, why is he that way? But, there was people that came out of that experience, like Pam Skaggs, who's a friend from back then and was an ex-girlfriend from early on. She wanted to be a model, a very successful model here in Dallas. And she was in that church that day. There were other people who were also, Chris Smith, who's one of my oldest friends, an attorney, and, it changed his relationship at that point. And he decided he wanted to be an attorney. It's like it's interesting, those things happen. You have nothing to do. And I'd put Deep Ellum in that category for me also, and the Star Club, that they were mind shifts, where you suddenly see things and it makes you question. For me, it was like, why am I in Dallas? Honestly, there must be a bigger world if this, French architect can come to Dallas, Texas, and develop a club here that's so non-Dallas. What's outside of Dallas? And it pushed me toward eventually going there. Luckily I got accepted into a great school, but I was going there no matter what at some point. It was going to happen. It was just when.
Yeah, I can see that like the Stark experience for you being a gateway to the world in a way. And Deep Ellum was certainly, to me, when I went to Deep Ellum, I was escaping the sort of materialistic cloned mall culture of Dallas. And the old bricks and the railroad tracks, and I rented a warehouse there in '84, and I quit cutting my hair. And to me, it was like I left the world to create a world that I could be happy and believe in. And it became a gateway for people. And I could see that though with the French designer and the Stark, and it was, the Stark was otherworldly from Dallas, because I was always going to, like Shannon's Clubs, Tango, Ado. We'd go to Mother Blues, see bands. And I saw, you mentioned David Byrne, I saw their first tour at the Agora Ballroom. They did Take Me to the River. They did a cover on their first tour that made them, happen. And it's like, those were escaping to me. It was live, but it was a sweaty kind of dirty club with a band playing, which is so cool. But what Blake and Philippe created at the Stark was an international doorway to sort of like this other opulent, mystical world. So I can see that being enchanting and bringing you to a different place.
Yeah, it really. It also opened the door where you go, what do these people do during the day? Because I'd only met people that were
they're
vampires.
I'll answer it. They're vampires. Okay, just to let you know, they had brooches and they were in coffins.
Brooches and eyeliner and the amazing clothing but it made me sort of go like, I don't run into any of these people during the day.
They look different all day.
Yeah, and then tattoos, which were it was nothing within my Christian upbringing and commercial real estate days. It was suddenly just like, wow, there is a whole different world out there, even within my own city that I didn't know existed. Like, what plane have I been walking in? But all that to me was really appealing, like pulling off the layers of the onion and getting to something where you're like, oh, that's the heart of this whole thing. And I guess at the end of it's like figuring out who you are. And right. All that adds to it.
That's right. It is about discovering who we are, and we're not clones that have to wear the same clothes from the same mall. It's a great thing. I think it's a very important rite of passage for us to courageously seek who we are. So what I want to ask you now is, how did you start? Like, you went to Deep Ellum, your perspective was enlarged. You went to the Stark, and how'd you get into starting the Deep Ellum Film Festival?
So, I don't go back in my life very often. I'm always moving forward, so I find it interesting to go back. But I was in LA. I'd produced 22 movies in 2 years that HBO and Showtime had purchased. I was on a track. I was developing projects when I'm on the Star Club, actually, way back when. And this would have been 95, 96. I was doing music videos with a friend of mine, David Dobkin. David directed Wedding Crashers and Shanghai Nights, Clay Pigeons, Eurovision that was just out. Produced a bunch of things. So I was doing music videos with him. He did a movie called Clay Pigeons, and it was the first sort of movie with Vince Vaughn and Joaquin Phoenix and Janine Garofalo. And a few weeks before it was coming out, they pulled the distribution money from it because Gramercy was shutting down, and they'd released another movie and it didn't do well. And so I knew they had posters, and I said, so where are the posters? Let's get them. Let's put them in my car, and let's go out and put them up ourselves on the streets, like Melrose, Staple Guns, Glue Guns, and a bunch of us, Tim Merrill and David and everybody. We went out there, and that night after we finished putting up the posters, we stopped. I checked messages again. I called home and found out my dad had most likely had pancreatic cancer, and that he was going to have a Whipple the next day, and could I get back there? And so I devastated to find that out. And first person with cancer in our family. And so we'd been lucky. We made it to that point in our life. I had a lot of cancer since. But anyway, I had helped the Santa Monica Film Festival start in LA simply by loaning it chairs and a projector and a big screen, and that suddenly started a film festival. So I moved to Dallas. I come to Dallas. They do the Whipple. They find out my dad's it's so bad they can't even do a Whipple, that they just sew him back up and say he's got 2 to 6 months to live. I'm living in Santa Monica at 12th and Montana. I'd found my perfect slice of heaven in LA, and I moved back. I rented it out. I left my girlfriend, and I moved my stuff cross country with my friend's help, and moved into my high school bedroom and took care of my dad every day while he had pancreatic cancer. And we found an experimental treatment, and after 6 months, he was better. He wasn't going to be healed. Pancreatic cancer is 94 to 96% fatal. And so I was driving down the road with him, and I'd met King Hollis and Nori Niven and James Faust and all these great people that are still friends today. And I saw that between the Dallas Video Festival and the USA Film Festival, there was only 2 film festivals in Dallas, that there was a place for an independent film festival that had maybe a little edgier things. And I love Deep Ellum, had since the 80s. And I was in the car with my dad driving down the road, and I told him I was thinking about starting a film festival in Dallas to raise money for cancer relief. And I wanted to do it in Deep Ellum. And he said, Michael, you have such little time left in your life. You have to figure out a way to make other people's lives better. And I realized on that car ride that I had committed to starting a film festival. And Chris and Candy Smith and their father helped us set it up. And they were performers who had a rich history with Deep Ellum also. And King and Nori and everybody else helped make that first one happen in '99. I borrowed money to put it on. And, it set a mark. Like, people suddenly were like, wow, Deep Ellum's got this too. And the .com thing was exploding at that point. And so we started the Deep Ellum Center for the Arts, and we put a theater in there, and we were at the Lakewood Theater. We were on the rooftop, the green room. We added things that I really liked, which were music and art and film. And we created the nonprofit. At first was Deaf Man, Deep Ellum Film, Music, Arts, and Noise. And noise could be whatever. And anyway, I had the first one, and it was really hard. And then my dad passed away January 9th of the next year. So that was in November, and I just took care of him for the next 60 days. And then I kind of came out of that with like, well, what am I doing now? Am I moving back to LA, or am I staying in Dallas? And I kind of fell in love with the people. I fell in love. I mean, I think that's always the strongest thing about the Dallas community is I had been so welcomed and so supported that in LA, if you have a great idea, people might be, oh, your great idea somehow means that I'm not successful. Like it's a very different approach, because if you get a part, somebody else didn't get a part. Or if you got that movie, somebody else didn't get to tell that story. Whereas in Dallas, you'd go, I want to start a film festival, raise money for cancer relief. And everybody's like, let's build a barn. Let's get it together. And so I fell in love with that community. And anyway, I remember going back to the Dallas Observer at the time and saying, I'd like for you to sponsor again, like to be our ad sponsor. They said, we're not going to do it. We heard you weren't even going to do it. We heard that you just won and done, and your dad, and that made me kind of angry. And I got Kit Carson, and we brought in Peter Beard, and the famous artist, and he agreed to come to Deep Ellum. His last shows were Paris and Tokyo, and the Boyd Gallery opened its doors to us, and an art man, Arthur James, came on and did the art, and that year, Sandra Bullock came, Griffin Dunn, all these people. Suddenly, it was on the map, and it was this thing, and it was being written about back when there were social columns. It was written about in all the columns, like where we were going with Peter Beard that night, and Sandra Bullock was on our bus. We bought a bus, like a hippie bus, and drove everyone around.
I remember the bus was the most visible, memorable, iconic sort of mascot of your festival. That was a brilliant idea. It stuck with me. I even mentioned it. You and I talked a month ago, and it's a memory. I like cruising the neighborhood in Deep Ellum. It was a very visual, smart thing to do.
Transit bus that we were at that time, and I know you've probably felt this way before. If you're doing something good and you put it out there in the cosmos that you need something, it'll walk in the door. And it'll walk in the door so fast that you realize, like, the tumblers had already been going, and maybe you just had this thought of something that was happening. And it could be for us that there'd be a wall we're staring at. But at that point, we were the whole top floor of where Adair's was. We had all 13. It was an old hotel, and that was the Deep Ellum Pictures offices and Deep Ellum Film Festival. And we would look at it, there'd be a brick wall, and we'd say, I wish there'd be an artist who could help us paint this Project Deep Lava. Then we had lava lamps and people would donate money to have them in their offices. And I wish somebody would do that. And literally there'd be a knock on the door within 5 minutes, and a guy would be like, I'm an artist. And I wonder if you need like anything painted for free. Like, I just love what you guys are doing. And that would happen over and over. So the bus was simply, we had said, wonder if it'd be cool if we had some like a billboard, a moving billboard, and a bus came driving through the neighborhood and parked in the parking lot across the street. And we went over.
So you all looked at it and went,
guy.
There it is.
Yeah, I mean, we went over to meet the guy, but not thinking the guy's going to sell his bus. And we meet him, a young, handsome guy with a really attractive girl, and a bus. You could tell that it had quite a party going across America. And we said, "Oh, we love your bus. That'd be great. If you ever think about selling it." Next day, he knocks on our door and he goes, "I want to sell the bus. I just found out my girlfriend's pregnant." And we were like, "How much?" Thinking, it's going to be something we won't afford. It's like $2,500. And it was in perfect condition. But that became this thing that we had throughout all the years of the Deep Ellum Film Festival.
That's beautiful. I love your story about, it reminds me, I think the Deep Ellum thing was like living in the eye of a hurricane. And you're talking about like if you needed something. I remember in my world at the Prophet Bar, it would be, okay, we have all the coolest artists and Rolling Stones party upstairs, and we've got all the coolest bands, but somehow we're 2 months behind on the rent. And we'd be like, oh man, what are we going to do? And the two frat boys would walk in the front door like, hey man, can we rent this place to do a party? And they'd be like, well, how much? I'd say, yeah, you could do a party here. How much would it be? Well, what's 2 months rent? 2,700 times 2. Yeah. And, okay, let's do it. That happened like weekly. And you try to tell people those stories, and it's like, it's hard to believe that the energy that was in the air in those days, and it's like that's how destiny feels when it's sort of unfolding before you, and that you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel, like I said, with my father giving me that Band-Aid and being there, he was buried on my birthday, my 40th birthday. So it was like this very, circular piece for life. I feel like the energy that went out there, because when you do something for good, and your intentions are not to get famous or get rich or get anything else, it was just like, I love this group of people, and I really want to help people who have cancer relief, not just to do research, because that's great and there's good people doing it, but to help them pay their bills while they're going through it. Like, they tell us they need money today, we give them to them tomorrow. Those kind of miracles walk into your life all the time. And I've always felt, because of that, because of the whole Deep Ellum experience and all the incredible film festival people that I met Rick Kirkham, who ended up being the documentary TV junkie that we made that went to Sundance and won the special jury prize, and HBO picked up. But literally just because of doing something good and somebody going, I love the Deep Ellum Film Festival. I have rights to this guy's story. Would you be interested? We can't figure out what to do with it. And more and more of life just led that way. It always has.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's a great point, that when it's motivation is a big thing. I mean, I grew up ignorant of the Bible and church. I really didn't go to church when I was growing up. And but what I found, like as a biblical example, in the book of Acts, there's a guy, it talks about Cornelius. Is a Roman guy in the book of Acts that was doing good. And he was like just this strong guy in the community that did everything great. And it's the one the angel told Peter to go talk to, right? Because Peter had a dream. He's like, go talk to Cornelius. And that reminded me of it, because whatever people believe about the truth of God, the reality of a God, or, what religion you are, it is a fact that I think is indisputable that if you are serving mankind and doing good for people, that you are part of a flow that great things are going to come and support what you're doing. And that is, even an atheist can realize that, and they do every day. And so it's like a law of the universe, basically, is what I'm saying.
I believe it. I think the energy you put out comes back to you. And it may not come back to you dollar for dollar. It's like I talk to people about why they should make movies and why they should support stories and why they should get behind things a lot of times. And I go over the analogy of there's internal, external, and eternal rates of return. And that if you can align that between you and the people who are supporting you, so that 2 years later, when you run into each other, it's not like this, oh, I'm going to avoid them, but more of a, we got into this together for all the right reasons, and here's where we are on that. And I think that's why the internal rate of return means I give you $1, you give me $1, something back. External rate of return means I believe in this story, or I believe in this filmmaker, or I want to help my cousin make their movie, or, it's a different relationship. So what you get back is the fact that you helped something happen. And the eternal rate of return is the good you do beyond you. The ones where whether it's the filmmaker you met told the story that changed the policy for government, or the fact that you're able to do something where you save something. And I tend to be lucky enough to be an amplifier of those people throughout my whole career, but didn't know that was the journey that I was taking. But I think it all came from the fact that if you do good things, the good things come back. I will also say that if you do good things, other people might not trust you because they assume that your intentions might not be pure.
No doubt. I mean, you have to do what you do in a true way and not worry about what people think about it. If the mission and the vision transcends the public opinion, and it must, because if you just listen to, there's so many whatabouters and doubters and pouters, you just got to keep trucking with it.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, my focus, while it's gotten more global and bigger, and things that I like to do and impact, or people I like to support who are bigger and better and stronger than me, are smarter. There's also, I've got 2 daughters, Athena and Delphine, and a wife. And my thing is like, how do I make this the best planet for those people? How do I make it so that in ways that they might not get till much later on in life, where they go, oh, that's why Daddy wasn't there, or that's why he took us there. I think that's what all of us, we hope to create something where the next generation and the generation after that start to look back and go like, well, how did that good idea? Oh, okay. They helped push it along. Maybe they didn't even originate it, but they helped support it.
I think that's an important point you just made about to be a parent and to also be a world changer. Is you always going to balance how you spend your time. And if you're on a mission that you believe in to make the world a better place, and you also want to spend quality time with your children, but if they grow up and they look back and go, hey, our dad was off working, but look what he worked on, that's going to speak to them for eternity in a way.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, I've always been lucky. I've tended to move to places where, like, I found my story by helping other people tell their story. I found my voice by helping other people find their voice throughout kind of life. And I don't think of myself as the best at almost anything, other than maybe being the best at recognizing talent and supporting it however I can, even if that just means connecting it or not getting in its way sometimes. But it's such an interesting journey. And when I talk to college students, I'll go in and they're all coming out of college with this, I got to know what I'm doing tomorrow. I got to know what my life looks like for the rest of my life. And I was like, let me tell you how every 5 years I've taken on a new journey throughout my entire adulthood, and tell you that maybe that's one path that's okay to take. That it doesn't have to be that what your job is going to be in 20 years. We're not in that world anymore. The last 2 years, if nothing else, told us you can't count on tomorrow. You can't plan long-term anymore. So make sure that you're enjoying life. Make sure that you're doing things that matter.
That's right. And make sure your dependency is not on temporal things, because, we've learned over the last couple of years to survive. You get right down to the basics. You need food, water, and shelter, and some friends.
Love, yeah, love definitely plays a much bigger role. That hug, think about it, we also lost physical intimacy to a large part. It used to be more of a hugging society and a peck on the cheek or peck on the lips, and now for a while it's been a little bit like, I can't even pick up that piece of paper you dropped. It'll be interesting to see what the next decade looks like.
Yes, it's beautiful, interesting times we're living in. So, what are you working on now that you're passionate about? That for the future, you said a minute ago, you said you don't like to look, you don't look back all that often. You look forward. So, what's forward for Michael Cain?
Let's see. Well, I'm working with a company called Waterbury Network and the Resilient Foundation, which are a for-profit and a nonprofit who tell mostly environmental impact stories. They have their own network, basically like a Netflix for impact films, and it's a free channel. I'm helping them set up their American systems. So basically, and I'm moving to Colorado, so I'm going to still have a Dallas home.
Wait a minute. Who did you consult about that?
Yeah, my wife has been consulting me about it pretty heavily, and my daughters.
Well, you know what? I'm not too upset about that because
You want to come visit?
I'm looking for a place. You know, I'm at the stage of my life where I've paid my dues, man. So I love Texas. I got some property out in the country here, and I'm looking in Colorado for another place to be up for like July, August, and September every year. Now, go back to your story.
Well, the Waterbury, luckily, and Resilient are both based out of the Netherlands. And so they are not concerned whether I'm based out of Dallas or based out of Fort Collins or Golden or Boulder or any of those. And
any other beautiful spot that we'd all love to be.
Yeah, I mean, those are, I'm very lucky that we fell in love with that over the last 2 summers. I never went to Colorado. I had friends from there, and whenever I went, I probably was having too good of a time and didn't fully take it in. And now as a healthier version of myself. But yeah, working with them, I'm consulting even with people still like Trammell Crow, who, we started EarthX Film together and EarthX TV and EarthXR and all the EarthXs, with his team, with he and Nathan Loftus and EarthX Film, the organization that I started, which I know this won't matter, but it's this weekend in the Arts District. I'm consulting as an advisor and friend to that. There's a lot of projects that matter to me. My basic rules are I only work on things that I want to work on with people I want to work with. There's the story of the Star Club that I'm committed to finishing, and that there's multiple ways that I want to finish it. And other stories about Dallas. We need to get together at that point too, but particularly at that pivotal time I think in America and history, really, I think that what was going on in Dallas was important. But picking up other projects, the Redfords, Robert Redford and Billy Redford, his wife, have a project called The Way of the Rain. And I'm working with EarthX to land that in Dallas, October 22nd with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. And so there'll be a lot of projects. There's a project that Brad Pitt and Global Green are doing in New Orleans where they're restoring the 110 homes that he rebuilt after the hurricane, and they need to be fixed up. So he's made a commitment and they've made a commitment. So I'm helping them align. So just taking on projects.
Well, you just mentioned about 5 to 7 major, beautiful projects that you're endeavoring.
I'm really lucky, like I said, that this whole thing has led toward me knowing great people and them trusting me to help them get to where they need to be.
Well, I will say this from what I know one thing about you, and that is that you do live out what you just proclaimed, that you help people to whatever extent you can, whether it's networking or help raise funding or advising. You do give of yourself to everyone in the arts and entertainment industry in a beautiful way.
Well, thank you. And same for you. I mean, I think that's the thing. There's a certain mentality or spirit of people who are like, it's not about me. It's about this. It's about talent, and it's about storytellers, and it's about impact. And everything I want to do, I want to have an impactful life. So for what's moving forward at this point, and things like supporting the Dallas International Film Festival, James Faust and that group, I just want to be there to help push them over the finish line. I don't want to necessarily run the race. I like to be there a lot of times just to get in there and help at key moments. And I hope that that's the way that I create impact in the world. and someday, we'll look back and go like, I get the fact that this is a better place because of something that Michael and ideally his girls did. Like I'd love to see them build on their passions to make this a better place. And so that's very driving for me right now.
That's beautiful. So that you found a good school for your daughters, or they homeschool, or?
They're Montessori girls. One of them's at Montessori Children's House now, and the other one's at Lumen, and they both are at the end of that school. And so it's time for them to go, and that's part of why the Colorado move. And we're accepted into Montessori school, one of them in Fort Collins. We're waiting for the second. And then on Golden, we're on a wait list. Who knows? We may end up moving there and not getting them in and changing things. But we're going to go to Estes Park this summer and live in a cabin of our friends for 6 weeks while we explore Colorado and figure out where we fit.
Perfect.
I think everything, as you get a little older, as we know, there's a little less stress to worry about knowing everything. It's more of just the confidence that you can help it get there once it presents itself.
Well, that's a beautiful point, and I think you're right, because number one, we've gone through decades of maybe getting a little over worried about something, and you see things always do pan out. Secondly, we've acquired some wisdom along the way. And thirdly, I've been humbled more and more through the decades where I'm more dependent on guidance and my surrendered lifestyle. Like, God, just show me what to do. Which is, so we're, time's a reality. It's so fun talking and getting to know you better. And we're coming close to our final moments. So here's a question I ask all my guests, and we've alluded over there somewhat. But tell me, what do you think? What are your thoughts on God?
So, I've had a long relationship with God. The God, a spiritual plane. For me, there's a God in my life. For other people, there's not. There can be this questioning of what God means to them. And sometimes that means this guiding force behind us. I feel that God's everywhere and surrounds us. And if we're open to it, we're able to get into a flow. If we're able to surrender ourselves and release ourselves to it, that we can go to places that we could never imagine going. I mean, like I said, I know that I put things out there to the cosmos that seemed impossible, and they were easy to accomplish once I simply allowed it to happen. And that to me is a forgiving character who looks beyond what we do every day and forgives us for the mistakes that we make, and is there encouraging us to do better and be better, and also putting the responsibility on us that we have to be better. It's a loving relationship.
That's good. So do you think when you grew up Church of Christ, do you think that foundational truth is still part of your theology then?
It is, and I attend church less than I used to, but in fact, I go to a Methodist church that I really like, Munger, which I love the spirit of it. I love the music of it. I love the thing, but there's a lot more for us of sort of our own studying and our own connection to it. And I have friends who are the same way, that we have conversations about it, and it doesn't always have to be within a church. But I found that the best connections and community come out of just having that openness. I even have atheists who are around me who are like, I don't believe in God. It's like, totally fine. We can still talk about things. We don't have to agree on everything.
Well, that's right, because God is love, and we love everybody no matter what they believe. And you just said something that I think is very important to touch on, is the understanding, the misunderstanding about church and what is the church and the building that we are supposed to go to. I mean, it's the scripture says that we are the lively stones that build up the spiritual temple. So in a way, sometimes I don't even want to use the terminology "go to church." Well, let's go meet with some other believers and sing and hear some teaching that's inspiring. But the building itself's not the church, right? We are the church. So when you're meeting at your home with some people and surrendered and seeking truth, you're having church.
Yeah, it's the community, and that's the big thing. Like with the Waterboro that I'm working with, their whole thing is about creating a community of people who care about the planet and who want to do impactful things. I think that's in many ways how I see it works with God. Is it's not enough to talk about it. It's not enough to just go in once a week and sing songs from the hymnal and to try to stop from falling asleep while you listen to the sermon. You know, those were like my childhood memories of things. And then later you evolve into realize like it's actually about this empowerment that comes from knowing that there's good people around you, that there's people who care about each other and selflessly. And that's how we probably should be taking the community that's created out of that spiritual background is probably the greatest force to do good. And in many ways, should probably take a lot of things away from the government, you know, the homeless issue, things like that. There's better ways to deal with this than the government throwing tons of money at it.
No doubt. Well, the thing that I hear when I'm listening to you there is I think the key thing is if we're courageous seekers of truth and we have the courage to leave tradition behind. Because my memory of growing up and going to church is, you know, I'd be watching David and Goliath, the claymation, on Sunday morning, praying that my mom wouldn't make us go to church because it was a big, cold, boring building and they were going to talk about Noah again. It wasn't a living thing to me at the Presbyterian church that we rarely went. But in seeking truth and seeking a different life and leaving the Dallas Mall, I created my own world in Deep Ellum. And like-minded people exploring truth through art and life and experience and community, God came and interrupted me through my black janitor and presented me with the way to surrender and to connect with God. So I think the key theme here is that if we're courageous enough to seek truth and with like-minded people, then we leave that tradition behind it turns everybody off. Like Jesus even said to the Pharisees that had the buildings, you are keeping people from entering in the kingdom because of the traditions and the ways that you're boxing everything in. So it's really about liberty and truth and love that we find them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's however you find that support in your life, you know, however you find your connection to your God is critical, but it is to being open to it and being willing to listen, you know, listen to that voice that comes in your head where you're like, God doesn't speak to you the way that we're taught that God speaks to you, I think. We were all expecting this Charlton Heston voice to tell us what we need.
No, it's Morgan Freeman. It's Morgan Freeman now.
Well, yeah, but I'll beg to disagree to disagree. They're both good gods.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the challenge for this whole thing is like understanding that sometimes you're being told what to do or given the choice of something to do and listening.
Well, let me tell you, there's a chapter in my book, and you just perfectly segued me into this. And it's a very thing I'm very passionate about. And what you were just talking about is this. When God talks to us, it sounds like our voice. It's not Morgan Freeman or Charlton Heston because the Spirit speaks to us and it sounds like our voice. And that's why we have to discern, is that me? Is it something I want? Or is it God helping me? I believe that the loving creator of the universe talks to everybody, even the atheist. You know, picture the atheist driving home. They're sad about they split up with their girlfriend. They had too much to drink. And maybe the Holy Spirit, God says, just go home and rest. Tomorrow's a better day. And there's that other voice on the other shoulder. Oh man, go see your buddies over at that after hour party and do a bunch of drugs, you know? So I think we're shepherded before we even acknowledge there's a God. It's sort of what happened to me. I was a self-destructive person. So to me, I just want to underscore the grace and the love, and the Creator is shepherding us all. And you're right. It's people meet and connect in different forms and different paths, But there's hope because he really is watching over us and really cares about us.
Yeah, after I lost everything in real estate, I was working at an athletic club, Brookhaven Country Club, and a group of members took me on a yacht trip down to the Virgin Islands. I had no money to go, and they sort of liked me and brought me down there. And I get down there, and the captain of the boat saw like I loved it. He just saw I loved it. And he goes, you know what? You tell me that you're $200,000 in debt, you're in your 20s, you're not going to be able to make it back. I need a captain. How would you think about staying here, being a captain on this other boat for me? You'd live on an 86-foot black-hulled sailboat for free, attractive girls, like everything. And he said, but you got to let me know before we go back in tomorrow when we cruise in. We had two 42-foot Morgans, and we would sell each other. And I'm literally like, oh, my God, what a choice. Like, not go back to America, stay here in the Virgin Islands, live on this boat. I'd love that. I love water. And I get on a dinghy, and I go to this little bar that's just sitting on the smallest island that could be possible. It was all it was, with a donkey drinking beer. And I go out in the dinghy, and I'm sitting in the middle, and there's a billion stars above me. And I said, God, I either need to do this, that I know I'll be happy, or I need to go back and do something. And can you please tell me what that would be so I can make this choice? And I literally, clear as day, could have been in my head, and it said film. And I was like, wow. Okay. So I had to turn down that job, go back and start.
Wait, didn't you ask the guy, wait, do you have any cameras on the boat?
The next moment, by the way, after I heard film, when I'm like this moment of elation, I then realized I was in a dinghy in the middle of the ocean and terrified of sharks. And I'm like, what in the world am I doing out here in the middle of nowhere? But went back, and that one moment of being open to hearing an answer that maybe it came from within me, maybe it came there. But I'd been asking God every night after I'd lost everything, went from 6 figures a year to broke, sleeping on a mattress in an empty house at one point. And I just said every night, like, please just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. And in that moment, I listened to what I knew would make me the happiest in the long term. And that's what it's done.
What another beautiful, pivotal moment in the Michael Cain movie there. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing today and coming. And I just appreciate and love getting to know you better. And I know everybody that hears and watches this will too.
And next time, can I interview you?
Well, I'd love
Have we done that yet?
It's funny. I haven't done that yet. I've actually prayed like, Lord, show me who should interview me. I got a couple of episodes in me, so.
You've got an amazing story. You need to get it out there.
Well, thank you, Michael. And we're going to have to sign off now, or we'll get in trouble. They'll pull us out with those hooks. But thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Michael Cain and Russell Hobbs signing out.
Good night.